Well, hi, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to our second edition of Breaking News for this Friday, the 5th of July, 2024. And we have two huge stories we're going to give updates on this edition of Breaking News. They're monumental stories, actually. They could change the whole landscape depending on how they turn out. So we're going to deal with them right now and bring you up to date with the latest. All right. The two huge ongoing stories that we have updates are these. First of all, sources in Israel are confident that Israel's cabinet will accept the latest hostage deal proposed by Hamas. We'll see. And then our second huge story, why Biden must resign immediately or the 25th Amendment needs to come into play. That's an article by the Federalist. As more and more news organizations, people are coming out and saying he must resign and he must resign now. So let's look at the stories. Headline number one, hostage talk delegation returns from Qatar will resume negotiations next week. Optimism and truth hostage talks. Mossad chief goes to and from Doha. Hamas briefs Hezbollah. All right, so that's our two different headlines. All right, here it is. The delegation led by Mossad chief David Barnea returned after Hamas's officials told Hezbollah that they would agree to a proposal that would lead to a ceasefire. An Israeli delegation led by Mossad director David Barnea has returned from Doha on Friday night, that's tonight, after meeting with the Qatari mediators over Gaza ceasefire talks. According to a statement from the Prime Minister's office, the talks were only an initial meeting, and the delegation will return to Doha next week to resume talks. The statement also said that there were still gaps between the two sides that needed to be fixed in order to reach an agreement. Netanyahu agreed to dispatch a team to Doha for talks on Thursday after Hamas appeared to drop its upfront demand that Israel agree to a permanent ceasefire before a three-stage hostage deal got underway. Hamas's insistence that Israel must agree to end the war before it releases any of the remaining 120 hostages held in Gaza has been a major stumbling block of the deal. The Iranian proxy group Hezbollah has linked the fate of its cross-border violence with the IDF along Israel's northern border with Lebanon to the fate of the Gaza war. So a Gaza ceasefire would effectively end Israel's two front wars in the south and in the north. Earlier on Friday, Hamas informed its ally Hezbollah that it had agreed to a proposal that would lead to a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. Hezbollah leader Syed Hassan Nasrallah welcomed the step. Two sources familiar with the matter said on Saturday. All right, it's Saturday now in Israel. Okay, Netanyahu and Biden discuss on their end. Israel and the United States has been hopeful that a breakthrough has occurred. U.S. President Joe Biden first unveiled the three-phase deal on May 31st. Hamas had refused to accept it, showing signs of flexibility on the issue only this week after increased pressure from the mediating countries of Qatar and Egypt. Netanyahu spoke with Biden for a half hour on Thursday night as the two men went over the details of the deal and the latest amendments to the proposal. A U.S. official told reporters that there was an agreement on the framework, but there were issues with the sequencing. And now here's a headline from Israel National News. And this is kind of the key here. We heard these other stories about this was in play. But meanwhile, the Wall Street Journal reported, citing an informed source, that Mossad officials said they were optimistic that the cabinet would accept the proposal for a deal. On Thursday, following a preliminary discussion on the latest terms laid out by Hamas in the hostage release negotiations, Netanyahu again approved the deployment of the negotiating team to Qatar to continue the talks to secure an agreement to free the 120 remaining hostages. Now it says here, and this is very key, Prime Minister Netanyahu reiterated that the war will end only after all of Israel's objectives have been achieved and not a moment before, a diplomatic source added. Well, we'll see about that. A day earlier, the Prime Minister's office on behalf of the Mossad announced that the mediators had conveyed to the negotiating team Hamas's remarks on the outline of the hostage deal. Now, I always like reading the comments when I have a story like this. Here was the best comment. If Hamas agreed to a hostage deal, then option A, they're under a lot of pressure militarily, or option B, Israel gave in on everything. We'll find out soon enough. And I think that's the right answer. We'll see what happens, but this is huge. Now, hopefully, Israel won't, like we said earlier today, there's a pressure for Israel to compromise on some of the final goals there, and they just cannot do that. And they have to not only rid Hamas of their army, the military ability to fight back, they have to get rid of the leadership there. and have to make sure Gaza is not a repeat in sometime in the future, and they have to take steps to do that, whatever it might be. They need to do those. Now, is this going to be part of the deal? We will see. So let's just wait and see. Again, we'll find out soon enough, as this one commentator said. Now, that's huge. Now, here's a second one that might change everything. This is from the Federalist, invoking the 25th Amendment as constitutional and Democrats' best hope. This is from the Federalist. Again, like we said today, there was that stories of Philadelphia, I guess, a Pennsylvania radio station where Biden said yesterday that he was the first female black vice president. He actually said that, and then he got confused on a few other things. And this was the day he was supposed to show that he's not confused anymore. When they had the White House barbecue yesterday, he made some really odd statements, slurring his words, so showing he's just not up to it. And so we've seen more and more people, and a few more periodicals today that are very influential, and many of them are left-leaning, say he's got to resign, and he's got to resign now because he just can't govern. And this is the gist of this article from the Federalist. I want to read it to you. I think it's very well said, and it kind of lays it all out, because push is coming to shove here. Now, tonight in the U.S., a few hours from now, they're going to broadcast a interview that Biden did with George Stephanopoulos from ABC News. And we'll see. Supposedly, this, was going to be a hard-hitting interview to see how he responds to that. And, game might be over, maybe game, set, and match after this interview. We just don't know. But here's what the Federalist said, and they put it very, very well. Neither spin nor conspiracy theories can alter what the world saw during the debate: Biden's mental incapacity. The Democrats' public struggle session over what to do with the problem of Joe Biden must end. They know, and we know, most terrifyingly, that America's enemies know that our commander-in-chief is mentally incompetent. As such, the answer is clear, and the Constitution provides it. Joe Biden must be removed from office and the vice president sworn in as president. The only proper question for Biden and his party is whether the removal will be voluntarily under Section 3 of the 25th Amendment or forced under Section 4. Will Biden transmit, quote, his written declaration that he is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office? Highly unlikely. Or to Congress, will he do that? Or will the vice president and a majority of the cabinet inform Congress of President Biden's incapacity and remove him from office? The article goes on to say a day or two to decide is reasonable. A week stretches the bounds. But we are now at the point where the inaction by Vice President Kamala Harris and Biden's cabinet constitutes a violation of their oath of office. They solemnly swore they would bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution and that they would faithfully discharge the duties of the office. That oath mandates they provide Congress their written declaration that the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office. Now, there is no wiggle room, as the article says. There's no wait and see. If the president can convince the public he is fit for office, whether by choreographed appearances or edited primetime interviews, again, that's not the case. Neither spin nor conspiracy theories can alter what the world saw during the debate, namely Biden's mental incapacity. Whether caused by age, dementia, or Alzheimer's matters not. The President of the United States cannot discharge his duties if he lacks lucidity for even a fraction of the day. The Commander-in-Chief must be able to command the executive branch 24/7. Any counter is political and constitutionally unsound. Yes, Biden has a horde of helpers who can and likely have made decisions on his behalf. But our Constitution established a unitary executive with the president individually and solely vested with the authority to command the executive branch. And the Constitution dictates what happens when that individual, here Biden, is unable to discharge his duties. Removing Biden from office is potentially fraught, however, because he is also the Democrats' presidential candidate. In fact, some Democrats seem concerned only about removing Biden from the ballot and not the presidency, oblivious to the paradox they are promoting that Joe Biden isn't competent to run for re-election, but is competent to run the country. With only 4 months until the general election, Democrats have no good option, but they do have the constitutional one. Ironically, the constitutional option is likely the best choice, politically speaking. By removing Biden from office, Democrats can enter their convention with a sitting president, Kamala Harris, to replace Biden on the ballot. They can then spend the next month and a half focused on the new candidate instead of debating whether to replace Biden at the convention, while attempting to avoid another public display of incapacity. Replacing Biden at the convention would also prove devastating to Democrats. Saving democracy cry because they're Democrats saving democracy cry because it would disregard the party's primary voters without justification. In other words, already 99% of the delegates voted for him. Democrats could also work to quietly quash any infighting over Harris's selection during that time, while rallying party faithful to the ticket by promising an attractive vice presidential candidate. Now, the story goes on. This approach would also be the worst for Republicans. While a President Harris might seem a less formidable opponent now that the populace knows, and that's in italics, Biden is incompetent, he would be the easiest Democrat to defeat come November, mentally and policy-wise. That might prompt some congressional Republicans to remain silent rather than demand that Vice President Harris and Biden's cabinet deliver a declaration of incapacity. And here's a great point, but they too took an oath to bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution and faithfully discharge the duties of the office. So while Republicans are currently enjoying, the downfall here of Biden, his mental breakdowns, it's understandable that they're enjoying that, given that just 2 weeks ago, the press accused those highlighting Joe Biden's incompetence as peddling, quote, a cheap fake. Our country and Constitution must come first, not their desire for political office. Now, here it goes. Of course, that doesn't mean Republicans wouldn't be without grounds to attack a presidential candidate, Harris. Beyond her bungling of everything she touched as vice president, Harris would be forced to defend her delay in seeking Biden's removal from office. For while the public at large only recently saw Biden's incompetence, the Federalists and others have been highlighting it for years. And as Biden's vice president, Harris clearly knew he lacked the capacity to serve as commander-in-chief long ago. Yet she, like the other members of the administration, only acted once they realized they could no longer hide the truth from voters. Now the story concludes. Harris's continued defense of Biden will only cement this reality in voters' minds, as will her ongoing inaction as she waits out Biden and his family's efforts to rehabilitate the president's image. The Democratic Party will likely find itself tarred for years by its effort to prop up Joe Biden. Now, here's the key. This doesn't mean they won't win the 2024 presidential election, though. This is very important to understand. They could still win in spite of all this going on. And Republicans would be foolish to think the Democrats' current implosion will prevent party loyalists and activists from getting ballots into the box, even if they yet don't know the candidate for whom they will be collecting votes. Again, we must wait and see what will occur. So it really looks like the proverbial push is coming to shove after yesterday's Biden's radio interview, where he called himself the first female black vice president, where he fumbled again the speech at the White House during this barbecue on July the 4th, where he said, welcome to July the 4th, ho, ho, ho. He just doesn't seem to be with it. And he's every time he opens his mouth, he's proving he can't be, and he isn't. And so something must happen. And because, like we have been saying this last week, the real problem is not the election. The real problem is what happens in the next 7 months with our enemies, what they might do and what they could do. There is a story we had from one of the papers that 1/3 of the Russian people think if Putin nukes Ukraine, that's fine. So we got that. We talked yesterday about Xi and Putin talking together about, the coalition they're forming with Iran, basically 20% of the GDP of the world, and just shutting out the United States. And who knows what Xi may do in Taiwan, what Putin may do in Ukraine, what little rocket man may do in North Korea. We just don't know what Iran may do. The possibilities are endless when you don't have someone sitting in the White House that has any power, any authority. And this again fully reflects what the Bible assumes at the time of the end, that the U.S. is not a player. And as we said yesterday, as we did the second program, the scripture does not allow the United States to be a major player, because in the Ezekiel 38-39 invasion, the leader of this group, called Gog, is not afraid of anyone coming down and on the side of Israel and basically helping them during this invasion. And no one does, no country does. Now, the God of the Bible does, but he's not afraid of any country, meaning the United States is not a player at that time. And that's exactly where we're at now and where we're going, and we will see what happens. So, with the story in Israel about a possible ceasefire and with possible, I mean, this is monumental with the president. We had this during Nixon's administration, but I haven't had it since. A president, resigning from office or being taken out of office. This is, new ground, and we'll see what happens. All right. Anyway, those are the two stories today. We'll keep abreast of what's going on. I'm Don Stewart. Thanks for watching. And again, let me remind everybody, and again, new people every day, for knowing what will happen at the time of the end. Check out our website, Educating Our World, where we have some 65 books on 11 different subjects, including Bible prophecy, where there's a dozen books on Bible prophecy, telling you in great detail what the scripture says will happen at the time of the end. And the better news is everything is free. All the downloads are free from Educating Our World. All right, I'm Don Stewart. Thanks for watching. Until next time, as always, may the Lord richly, richly bless.